welcome. I hope you are all doing well. Today I want to share with you my recipe for Beard Balm. I make this for my husband using herb infused oils and a little bit of beeswax and essential oils. It smells really good. This is a 2-ounce tin that I got off of Amazon, and this recipe does make 2 of them. And as you can see, they are very full. If you didn't want to fill it so much, you could do 3 tins. This label I did design myself using Photoshop, and it is printed on craft sticker paper. I like to put the recipe on the back of all the things that I make. I don't sell these, I just make them. And I often forget what recipes I use for different things. So by putting it on the back, it helps me remember in case my husband wants this again. This video is the first in a series where I am hoping to share with you some tips and tricks to incorporate witchcraft and spell work into your everyday life. Now, if you're just here for a beard balm, totally cool, stick around. You don't have to make it witchy, but I know there has been a few requests to show how I incorporate my practice into daily life. So that's what we're doing today, and what will be a regular series on this channel. This is also a perfect project for those of you who are still in the broom closet and don't want something that is overtly witchy. It just seems like just a general beard balm that you could buy at the store. We've just tweaked it a little bit to add intention and some magical properties to the recipe. To make this balm, you're going to need some simple ingredients. I used olive oil as the oil that I infused my herbs into. This is mint that was grown in my friend's garden. And then I also used rosemary, and this is just standard rosemary that you can get from a grocery store. This is just one of our store brands. You don't need anything fancy. Organic is preferable, but you can use what you can get. In addition to the olive oil that I used to infuse the herbs, I also used a little bit of coconut oil, and then I used some beeswax. This is a large chunk of beeswax that I actually got from a local beekeeper. This is one of many that I have. You can buy it in little pellets or pastilles, and it is so much easier to work with than this. But this is actually from local bees that actually just lived in the community that we used to live in. So you're going to need some beeswax. If you are vegan, there may be alternatives that you can use in a balm or a salve, but you'll have to do that research for yourself. I like to use this. Before I get into the recipe, I just want to share a few tips with you. The first tip I want to share with you is to use dedicated tools for working with wax. I do not like to use any things that are going to be used in my kitchen that have had wax in them. For example, the Pyrex measuring cup that I use to melt everything down to create this balm, that is only for salve making. It is used with beeswax all the time. I do wipe it out with a paper towel once I am done creating it, because you do not want to rinse beeswax down your sink. Okay, so just wipe it out with a paper towel. You don't want to clog your pipes with this. So be very careful, be very mindful with how you're working. The spoon that I use to stir is also for salve and balm making only. It is, it's not something that is going to go into my culinary drawer and then be used to stir a soup later. It is purely for making cosmetics and that kind of thing. Beeswax also has a very high melt point, so make sure that you are using tools that can withstand that heat. I like to use a double boiler for this, But again, if you're using a double boiler, you want to make sure you do not get any of the water into your recipe, because water and oil and wax, they don't mix. It can make your balm go rancid really quickly, and it can also just cause some funny things. So just make sure you don't get any of the water from your double boiler in your recipe. The last technical tip that I have is to monitor your temperature if you can. So I have seen a lot of kind of DIY recipes that don't monitor temperature, but I also have watched a lot of professional cosmetic, like soap making, beauty products, like all sorts of stuff like that. I've watched professional videos about that. The reason you have to monitor your temperature for essential oils in particular is because certain essential oils have a certain flash point, which means if you put them in when the wax is too hot, it'll basically burn off and you're just wasting product. So for me, I was using rosemary in my essential oil blend, and rosemary is the essential oil that had the lowest flash point from what I was using. So I wanted to make sure that my mixture was at a good temperature to add in that essential oil. And now some people will not monitor temperature at all, and if you choose not to, that's fine. I'm not going to dictate what you do. This is just what I like to do. So I do monitor my temperature and make sure that I am incorporating my essential oils when it is safe to do so. My last tip, which is not really a technical tip, is just to make sure that you are creating your project, your product, whatever it is. This applies for anything that you might be incorporating spell work into, with intention. So the entire time that I was stirring the oil, while I was infusing, while I was melting the wax, while I was stirring in the essential oils, I had my intention in mind, and I was putting that intention into the product that I was creating. So this will look different for everyone. What my intention was when I was creating this, I'm not going to tell you the exact wording that I was using because it'll be different for everyone. But I was focusing on, hair growth, hair health, and also, since I was making this for my husband, just setting the intention of I am making this for someone who I love, and just filling the balm with love. It sounds funny because balm sounds like bomb. And it's explosion. We're not exploding anyone. We're making a nice, luscious beard balm. Now let's get into what I actually used to make this recipe and the reason behind it. I think this is so important, the why. So often we don't understand why we're putting in certain ingredients. You don't know the magical correspondences or even just the health properties of certain things. I have been studying herbalism for a while, so I wanted to incorporate that with magical properties and just make a very nourishing product that I was going to be pleased with and that my husband was going to love. So for this, I chose rosemary and mint, and I infused those into olive oil. And because I wanted to do this rather quickly, I did use a heat transfer method. I did this on my stovetop, but if you have more time, my preferred method is actually to do it slowly. I will put the herbs into a mason jar with the oil and leave them on my windowsill. And I will leave them for a full month. Depending on what I am wanting to incorporate, I might do it on, say, a waxing moon or a waning moon, but that's for a different video. So you can choose whether you do it the heat transfer method, like I'm showing in this video, or a sun method, which is kind of more a traditional method for infusing herbs. So I have my notebook. I always write my recipe and why I'm doing things just so that I can remember it. And so I used rosemary because it can help with circulation and it also aids with growth. And then I went with mint because mint is good for soothing irritation and it also stimulates the follicles. So when my husband is putting this on. He's not only putting it topically, but he's putting it underneath and on his skin as well. So it's really helping to stimulate growth, reduce any irritation from ingrown hairs, or just, I don't know, I don't have a beard, but apparently they're very itchy. So that's why I did that. The oils that I chose, I did olive oil, for one, because it's a very nice neutral oil. I love to infuse my herbs into olive oil. It's typically my first choice, and it's also readily available. I buy mine in large containers from Costco, but you can find it at pretty much any grocery store, and it's not overly expensive. It's got a nice neutral scent. It's not overpowering. But olive oil is also nourishing to the hair, and it does also help to promote growth. One thing I do want to try, maybe next time I do this, is adding some castor oil, because castor oil is also really good for hair growth, but castor oil can be sticky. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to incorporate it. I didn't know if my husband would like it. So we may play around with that. Let me know down in the comments if you've ever put castor oil into a beard balm. And then, so the last oil I did use was coconut oil, and I used 4.4 parts olive oil to 1 part coconut oil. For my recipe, that was 100 grams of olive oil and 25 grams of coconut oil. The reason I picked coconut oil is because it does promote soft, healthy hair, and it also has antifungal properties, which is great. And again, I use that just as 1 part. Coconut oil is solid at room temperature, especially in the winter. It is actually -25 out today, so everything is a little chilly. So you have to take that into consideration when you're making your balm. In the summer months, this balm will be a little less solid than it is currently, and depending on where you live, the temperature you keep your house will also change the consistency, because coconut oil is hard when it's cold and runny when it is warm. So keeping that in mind and knowing the consistency of the balm that I wanted to make, I did 1 part beeswax to 5 parts oil. So we have 25 grams beeswax, 25 grams coconut oil, and then 100 grams of the herb infused olive oil. One more tip I just thought of is that if you are using a block of beeswax like this, be very careful cutting it. This is very, very solid. This is a very hard wax. I have a dedicated knife and cutting board that I use. Now, the knife I use is just a really crappy dollar store knife, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. I do plan on upgrading that, but that's what I have right now. But you also do not want to use your good kitchen knife for this, because it will ruin your knife. It'll get residue on it, and you don't want to ruin it. So have a dedicated knife. But again, if you can buy this in little like pellets or pastilles or grated, just little chunks even, it's a lot easier to work with than this. But this is what my local beekeeper was able to provide me with. So now on to the essential oils. I did not fragrance this overly strong. I definitely used under the recommended usage because myself nor my husband really likes something that's overly perfumey. I use the essential oils more for their magical properties than I did for their scent. And I actually had made my labels with what I had wanted to use, and then when I went through my essential oil stash, it turns out I didn't actually have what I thought I did. On this I put rosemary, peppermint, and cedarwood oil. I didn't actually have any cedarwood oil, and the only rosemary and peppermint I had was actually in a blend. So I had to concoct on the fly a blend, but I did want to have, again, the peppermint and the rosemary, like the infused oils, for those properties. And then I also wanted something grounding and earthy, which is why I originally wanted cedarwood, but it still smells really nice. I can't remember what I ended up putting in. Maybe it had pine in the blend. Still a woodsy smell. I really wanted to use patchouli, but my husband hates patchouli. I personally love patchouli. He hates it. Tea tree would have been another really nice one to put in here. So when you're using essential oils, make sure it's something that you like the smell of. Make sure it's something that's skin safe, and you can look into the properties of the different ingredients as well. So now let's get into how we actually craft this beard balm recipe. To start, I put my herbs into a mason jar. I started weighing out my herbs because I wanted to be able to recreate it if my husband liked it. But unfortunately, the herbs weigh less than my scale was able to calculate. My scale did not want to measure in a single gram. I kept putting more mint in, and then all of a sudden it jumped to 4 grams, and it didn't want to do anything between 0 and 4 grams. So I just eyeballed it. Not really a big deal. I put in about 2 parts mint to 1 part rosemary. I just put that into a small mason jar and then poured over 100 grams of oil. If you wanted to make a larger batch, you could. If I'm making just an infused oil for use in, like I have a calendula oil that is kind of always available because I use calendula oil in so much. So when I'm doing that, I just fill a large jar about halfway full with calendula and then fill it with olive oil. But because this, I was just kind of testing out this recipe, testing out the scents, testing out to see if we were going to like it. I did only use the 100 grams of oil because I didn't want it to go to waste. So then I took that mason jar and I put it into a saucepan with a little bit of water, and I let it simmer in the saucepan for a few hours. Again, you could use a more traditional method of sealing the jar, putting it on a windowsill and letting it sit for about a month, shaking the jar every once in a while to make sure that you're moving the plant material around in the oil. I just stirred it every time I went into the kitchen. And I mean, this is my living room, that's my dining room table, the kitchen is right there. I don't live in a big house, I'm in the kitchen all the time, so leaving it there wasn't a big deal. Just stirred it every time I walked through the kitchen. After about 4 or 5 hours, I just shut off the heat and let everything cool down, and then I put the lid on it and I just dried off the jar, put it to the side because it was then about 10 o'clock at night and I didn't want to do anymore. So the next day, I actually started the process of making the balm. If you've ever made a salve, pretty much the same thing, just a different ratio of beeswax to oils so that it has a slightly different consistency. And also the consistency really depends on what you prefer. Some people prefer harder products, some people prefer softer. It's worth testing out to see what you like. This is a softer consistency, making it really easy to work into the hair of the beard. So once my oil was infused, I then put it over the, it's actually a Pyrex measuring cup that I use to melt down my beeswax and everything. So I put my beeswax in, and then I put my coconut oil in, and I strained out my herb infused oils through a mesh strainer that was lined with cheesecloth. You want to make sure you don't get any of the herbs into the mixture, just to make sure that the shelf life of the product is as long as possible. Now, talking about shelf lives, this should be good for up to about a year if stored properly, but I mean, it's not a lot of product, so my husband will definitely go through it long before it goes rancid. But if it smells funny or if the consistency changes, then just throw it out. Depending on the age of your oils, depending on how dry your herbs were, there's a lot of things that can play into how long the product will last, and there are no preservatives in it. So just keep that in mind. And again, if you get water in it, you do not want to get water in it. Water can make it go rancid. So I melted down all of my beeswax and my oils in the Pyrex container in a double boiler. Again, making sure not to get any water into the mixture. And then once the beeswax was mostly melted, there were still a few little pieces. I took it off the heat and just let the residual heat of the melted oil and wax fully melt the remaining beeswax. I then took the temperature periodically and continued to stir periodically until the oils and wax mixture were at a place where I felt it was safe to add my essential oils into it. And once the essential oils were in, I did give it a stir for a good minute or two. You really want to make sure that your essential oils are well distributed through your product. You don't want any pockets of essential oils. You want to make sure everything's nice and distributed. So again, while I was stirring, I was making sure to focus on the intention that I wanted for this product. So as I was stirring, thinking about how much I love my husband and about him having, a long and luxurious, well-maintained, manageable beard, that kind of thing. I was just thinking about that, putting that intention into the product as I was stirring it. And again, if you're not here for the magical side, just stir it. You can be listening to your favorite music and just stirring it and just, go about your day. You don't have to do anything extra. And then once it was fully stirred in, I just poured it into the containers and let them sit where they are until they are solid. You don't want to be moving it. You don't want to accidentally spill any of the hot wax. It is very hot. Be careful. Use proper safety measures when you're dealing with these hot jars and hot containers because you don't want to burn yourself. You don't want to have to make a St. John's infused oil for burns after this. Trust me, you don't. But that is a wonderful oil for burns. And then once your balm has hardened, it should look like this. And to use, you literally just have to rub your fingers on it, pick some up with your fingers, and then rub it into your beard. Now, I don't have a beard, so I can't show you that. But there's plenty of tutorials on YouTube about how to use Beard Balm. So that's my recipe for how I made this Best Dad Beard Balm for my husband. You don't have to be a dad. If you try this recipe for yourself, I would love to hear what you think of it and how it goes. You can tag us over on Instagram. That will be linked down in the description box below. I hope you all have a fantastic day. Stay safe and enjoy your beard balm. Bye.